nothing wrong with the radio. Must have been the station.
Which row is it in?
I wonder what happened to the one from last year. Each year we spend good money on these things. We come out here and the one from last year's gone.
Well, the flowers die, and the caretaker or somebody takes them away.
Yeah, a little spit and polish. You can clean this up. Sell it next year. Wonder how many times we bought the same one. Hey, come on, Barb. Church was this morning, huh?
My name is Dominic Garvey, and I live here in Boothbay Harbor, Maine. And I've lived in a number of places over the years, but this is what I call home for the past 24 years. I was born in Philadelphia and raised in Philadelphia, but I've lived in Pittsburgh and in Paris, and then in New York for some 20-some years. I was working in New York, either teaching or working as a music vocal coach for New York City Opera. That was the big love of my life. I was in Pittsburgh from, I guess, let's see, it would have been 1960 to 1967. I was a member of a Roman Catholic monastery devoted to teaching, and I was sent, literally, to Central Catholic High School in Pittsburgh. It's a school that borders on Carnegie Mellon, and it was quite a wonderful school. It was a college prep school for boys, and it offered an excellent education to kids in those days. And it was there that all of this story started. I was teaching history classes because that was what my initial education was preparation for, but I was also teaching some drama. I taught one drama class and one film class. And it was in conjunction with the drama classes that I was the moderator of the school dramatic productions. And a girl by the name of Mary Ann Russo was in productions for 2 years, and it was her uncle who was one of the writers and one of the producers of the film Night of the Living Dead. And so, out of the clear blue sky, George Romero shows up and he says, how would you think some of your students would like to spend some of the summer vacation working and filming in a movie? I said, well, I think they'll be extraordinarily pleased to do so. And I said, you know, I might be inclined to want to go along myself. And he said, well, that would be wonderful. So beginning in the summer of '65, we would go down. We were supposed to get down onto the heights at where Duquesne University was located, and that is where Latent Image Studios were located. They had an old beat-up school bus. We would get into the bus and we would drive down into Cannonsburg, West Virginia. We moved up onto a farm that belonged to Perry Como. And the house that you see in the film, The Night of the Living Dead, was on Perry Como's property, and most of the film was made or shot right around the house. The reason that I got into it was, I guess I had some kind of dramatic training or something or other, and I was asked to take care of Ghoul Group A. The ghouls were divided up into Ghoul Group A, Ghoul Group B, and we would just practice moving very slowly across these farmlands. And then, of course, when he was satisfied with the work, then we began actually shooting our part in the film.
What year was
This was in the summer of 1965. George initially told us that we were shooting a horror film, but that it was going to be done in the nature of like comic book characters, and that while there would be some violence, it wouldn't be anything other than the kind of thing that one could see in comic book strips. The religious order had no problem with my working on the film, particularly with the kids. It was a sort of a fact after the matter of when I informed my immediate superiors that I was running around in a pair of sewed up boxer shorts, and I suppose there might have been an eyebrow raised at that. And the general consensus was, well, what kind of a movie is this? And I said, you know, it's just these guys shooting this movie, this low-budget film. It probably isn't going to amount to much. And they said, well, maybe it would be better if you didn't have your name on the credits. I said, that's fine with me. So I remained creditless. The 1 week, sort of, I guess it was sometime between the second and third week, we ran into a period of rain. And so the phone calls would go out in the morning that there would be no bus leaving from down at Duquesne. But altogether, I don't think it took more than 3 weeks to do. As ghouls know, we were not given scripts. 2 of the high school students that I had were actually given scripts and play prominent roles in the film. They play the high school couple in the film. Another girl from the school, her name was Judith O'Day. She was this tall, lanky blonde, and he really just loved her. And they had scripts, but when we would go to work, we really had no idea what we were doing other than George would be somewhere out there in front of us telling us what to do and how to do it. And most of the time, we didn't have any lines to say. Animal noises were added later, but we didn't have any lines to say, and so sometimes very curious things were said between the people as they were inching their way along. He decided to reward me with a particularly interesting scene in the film, and I guess reward is the proper word because my kids did really, really well for him. The high school kids make an attempt to get into a truck, get some gas from what they hoped was an old pump. They hoped that there was still some gas in it. They were going to put gas in the car, and they were going to try and make a break for it.
You ready upstairs? Yeah. Okay, toss 'em.
I'm going with him.
Get back in the cellar.
I'm going.
It's too late. Well, if you're coming, come on. Get in. the pump.
Hang on.
Now, turn your cars and get out of the truck. Drag you out there and beat you those things.
My great moment of cinematic fame came when I was invited to come over, reach into the smoldering ruins of the truck, and devour whatever I chose to pick up and pretend to eat. What I did pick up was a huge ham bone that had all kinds of gristle and stuff hanging from it, and I pretended to be eating it very, very hungrily and noisily, and that was the great moment. They originally said that they were going to try and make the film for $6,000. That very quickly went to $13,000. But by the time the picture opened in 1967 in Pittsburgh, and what they did was they had a viewing in a regular first-run movie theater, and it was presented as some kind of a gala affair. By the time it had gotten to that, the film actually cost $66,000. They raised it from friends, largely from friends who, some of the friends ended up in the film. The young man who accompanies Judy O'Day in the opening sequences of the film, and the first one to be attacked by the ghouls, he was one of the financial angels of the production. Mr. Russo, who helped write the script or helped put the script together, he was one of the backers of it. And they just used every possible resource they could, emptying out their credit cards and doing all kinds of things like that. The Pittsburgh critics just smashed it. They just thought it was deplorable, that it was horrible, that this was just one of the worst things that ever happened. They thought it was just disgusting, and that was supposedly to be the end of the film. George had a terrible time with whoever the lawyer was who was assigned to handle his legal affairs. George, somewhere in 1968, lost control of the film completely. And that is one of the reasons why, after it achieved its notoriety and popularity, all kinds of companies began making copies of the film. And when VCRs first came out, the various types of editions of the film came out because it was without any kind of royalty. There was no, he never earned any money out of the film. What he did earn was fame, and fortune came after that. In 1973, the film was picked by the Museum of Modern Art in New York City to be part of its permanent collection. And if you ask me, why was it picked? Well, I think as an outstanding example of the horror genre, American independent filmmaking, quite possibly at its very best. And life went on. The high school kids graduated from high school. I graduated with doing a history degree at Duquesne. And I was sent off to another school. And while I was at that other school, I decided to leave the Teaching Institute, this monastic group. And I found myself in New York working in New York and teaching in New York whenever I had the chance. I was working in this music store that a friend of mine owned, and they came in one morning and they said, "Have you seen today's paper? You got to see this. Remember that movie you were talking about?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "You remember that movie that you made back in..." I said, yeah. Well, we opened up the paper, and there was a full-page ad in the New York Times, actually with me in my boxer shorts, life-size, in the, a full-page ad is about big. There I was for everybody to see. And the announcement was that this film was going to start showing at the Waverly Theater in the West Village on Friday nights. Well, it turned into an incredible cult film. People came from all over. The film began showing all over. Pauline Kael, who at that time was writing film criticism for The New Yorker, in The New Yorker, did a whole article on it in which she just went on and on and on, discovering all these wonderful things about this independent American film made in black and white, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The next thing you know, I hear that the museum has bought it, and the film absolutely caught on, and it was a major thing. It was a good thing for George Romero, because the next thing you know, there up on the big screen is Dawn of the Dead. And George was very loyal to Pittsburgh. He went back out to, well, I don't suppose, maybe he never left Pittsburgh, but he went out to Monroeville, which was a sort of suburb of Pittsburgh, and he shot the film in a mall. That movie caught on. Everybody thought it was wonderful. George Romero's career was made. I do want to tell you the story of a high school kid who, he was just a really great kid. He came to me and he said, "Oh, I wasn't there for the days when everybody was signed up to be in this movie. Can't you do something for me? I want to do something for this movie." They said, "Sure, he can be our gopher." Now, in Hollywood lingo, a gopher is not a little animal that burrows around in the ground, but a gopher is, the cameraman might say, "Hey, I need a cup of coffee. Will you gopher a cup of coffee for me?" And the boy did it. The boy himself, he didn't go to college. He stayed with Romero. Today, well, his name is Tom Savini. Today, he is one of the principal people in Hollywood who designs and administers science fiction or fantasy or horror film makeup. He's written 3 important books on the subject and has done all kinds of work with Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino is a movie director. He's the Kill Bill 1 and 2 and a couple other films. He's one of the people who credit George Romero as being one of their sources of inspiration. And this kid certainly did well with his gophering for Night of the Living Dead. Did anybody get paid for this film? I believe that the actor, Dwayne, the black actor, he came from New York. He was a friend of a friend and had apparently come out to Pittsburgh simply to visit. Somehow or another met up with George, and they were looking for a good-looking young black actor because it was very important to George that a black man, that a black American be in this film. I believe he must have gotten some kind of pay, but it was really something for George to make Dwayne the central figure in the film. As a black man, and this is we're doing this 1965, 1966. This is when we go home at night and we watch the television, we're seeing all the racial riots down south and the dogs and the fire hoses being turned on all the black people down south. And to have him be the central figure and perhaps the most sane, rational figure in the film was a very, very strong political statement on George's part. And that was definitely done deliberately. I mean, this did not happen by chance. You know, I should mention this too. They only had one 35mm camera, not a bank of them like they do when they shoot movies today. They had one 35mm camera that they had actually had to, they bought it, it was a used camera. And if you ask me why wasn't the movie made in color, I am sure that George will give you reasons that say, like, well, the great movies of Hitchcock were shot in black and white lends itself to the horror genre of filmmaking. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes down to it, it's dollars and cents, you see, because color film cost more to shoot, and it obviously cost more to develop. And so it was shot in black and white. I have kept in touch with the guy, the boy who was blown up in the truck, and yes, I have kept in touch with Tom Savini. There is a friend of mine here in town, Paul Noah, Paul is really into horror films, and he's into makeup and masks and all that sort of things. And once when I told him that I knew Tommy Savini, I thought Paul would just have a stroke right on the spot. And Paul said, please get in touch with Savini. And I've kept in touch with him off and on over the years, but the last time I spoke to him, I believe it was 3 years ago, and Tommy had promised to come to visit Boothbay Harbor in the summertime, but it never turned out. And I guess he just wasn't able to fit it into his schedule, whatever that consists of. But I suspect the last time that I physically saw George Romero was at the Liberty Theater in Pittsburgh when we saw the film in March of 1967. George has spoken since 1965, 66. He has spoken about such things as the film sort of predates concerns with pollution of the atmosphere and how, well, you know, how things can be transformed, how the ghouls could actually come about. See, the wonderful thing about this movie is that you're watching it, and his use of TV and the use of the radio. You just look at a radio and you hear a news report on the radio, or you see a TV, and you'll see things on the TV, even a scene down in Washington on the TV.
It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder. A widespread investigation of reports from funeral homes, morgues, and hospitals has concluded that the unburied dead are coming back to life and seeking human victims. It's hard for us here to believe what we're reporting to you, but it does seem to be a fact.
You're coming from a meeting regarding the explosion of the Venus probe, is that right?
Yes, that was the subject of the meeting.
You feel there is a connection between this and the phenomenon?
There's a definite connection.
In other words, you feel that the radiation on the Venus probe is enough to cause these mutations?
There was a very high degree of radiation.
Well, just a minute. I'm not sure that that's certain at all. I don't think that has been
irrefutably that we have at this time.
In other words, it is the military's viewpoint that the radiation is not the cause of the mutation.
I can't speak for the entire military at this time.
He was able this way to bring a realism to the film, and it's that realism that lends itself to the horror, because you can really believe that this could possibly happen. It goes without saying that the ending of the film just totally caught all of us, including Dwayne. Totally shocked us, literally. It was an amazing thing, and we just couldn't get over it. And in hindsight now, it's absolutely brilliant. People have said in the meantime, you know, that loose threads. Well, it's never, you're never really told in the movie whatever does happen to these zombies. But of course, that's how The Dawn of the Dead, several years later, the so-called sequel, could be made. But to take the human element, because he wasn't really interested. And the zombies were not the end in itself. They were a means to establishing the central problem and core of the plot itself. And they just simply helped him do this, and I hesitate to say this socio-political that I do believe he was making. He was a really, I have nothing but the highest regard to make for him, to say about him. He had very, very important ideas that he wanted to get across. And the ending of the movie is the fulfillment of that idea. You know, of course I'm prejudiced, because I could say I had a part of it, and you know, whatever my career has been since then, it certainly has been wonderful to be able to say that I was part of this film. I was having dinner with some friends just the other night, and I told them that we were doing this, and they said, "Oh, I never heard of that movie." And I said, "Well, I'll bet your kids did." And they said, "No." Now, this is a couple my age, you see. So their kids are going to be in their 30s and 40s. They have heard of this movie. And so many people I know have said, "I started to look at this movie and I had to turn it off," or another friend of mine, Mary Miller, was telling me that she started to watch this movie once when she was all alone in the house, and she said it was the cause of one of the worst times in her life, because it truly affected her so much. I am a fan of horror movies and horror novels when they have an element of truth or the possibility of truth. When Stephen King first started writing his novels, I just thought he was wonderful. Because when he wrote things like Salem's Lot and Carrie and The Stand, I really loved them. And people would say to me, why are you reading them? And I'd say to them, because they scare me. And why do they scare me? Because there is an element that it really could happen. Now, once Mr. King decided to put strange-looking clowns and various, you know, spirits and stuff like that, he lost me. He lost me. But when a movie comes along like, well, let's use The Exorcist as an example. You know, having been raised a Catholic and, you know, having read about exorcisms and the, you know, that the devil could possess a human body, that kind of a film really scared the hell out of me, to tell you the truth. And so you say, do I like them? I'd say yes, but they have to be real good. Have I seen many of them lately? Not really. Though 2 summers ago, I watched one, and I'm afraid I can't tell you what the name of it is, but it was about a guy who, he gets caught in a traffic jam, and he's in West Virginia. I don't know, maybe West Virginia as a state sort of lends itself to this. He was in West Virginia, and he was going somewhere, and he was in a hurry. He got into a traffic jam. He goes off the main road into some side roads, gets himself lost, and falls into the clutches of a genetically deformed family. I found that to be quite a little bit bump raising. What was the name of that damn thing that came out a couple of years ago that everybody thought was the people wandering in the woods?
The Blair Witch Project.
The Blair Witch Project. My goodness, I could not, that left me absolutely cold. I couldn't figure what all the fuss was about that. That did not scare me at all. And, you know, I was real interested in seeing it because here again, an independent film, handheld cameras, and all the same sort of stuff that George had done, but it left me cold. Did you like it? No, okay. And I don't know, that may be very hypocritical of me because that is what the Pittsburgh critics said about George back in 1967, but somehow or another, I don't think the Blair Witchcraft has the same possibilities that Night of the Living Dead have. I'm not real crazy about this recent redoing of the movie in color, but I haven't seen it, so I have to weigh judgment. I believe it comes out in the stores in a matter of weeks, and I'm sure I'll be looking at it, but I just like to think the same old thing, just like in Psycho. In black and white, your imagination is encouraged to fill in the details. Sometimes when a film is in color, there's just too much color. I know that sounds like contradiction in terms, but to me, when you're talking about horror films, I think it does. It seems that there are a bunch of guys over at Bull Moose in Brunswick who are real fans of the movie, and when the lighting guy from the theater was over there recently, now he's just a recent graduate of the school, and I know you know him, Ben Wells Goodwin. Ben was over there, and he came running back to me, and he said, Dominic, look, there's a DVD version of Night of the Living Dead. Look, I bought you one. And he said, look, I have this poster, and they want you to come over there and sign some posters in Halloween week. And I said, well, I mean, really, what do they want me to sign a poster for? They said, Ben said, well, you're there in the poster. And I said, well, I'll go over and see them and see what they say. And it was just silly, but yes, I am going over this week to sign some posters. What price glory? Oh, actually, you know, it's the kind of a thing, it's one of those moments in life when it was very exciting and lots of fun to do this, particularly with the kids that I was teaching. And then, you know, to have it become a failure, or at least an apparent failure, and then to forget about it completely, and then 8, 9, 10 years later, discover that I'm part of this mad, crazy cult was really a lot of fun. And looking back on it, I truly believe that I've been gifted in my life with some wonderful stories, and I've done some wonderful things in my life, and I consider Night of the Living Dead one of the leading chapters in that book. But thank you so much for letting me share this story with everybody, and I hope that that everybody gets a chance to see the film, and if they have anything that they want to speak to me about, don't hesitate. I can always be found in the Hannaford Brothers almost every day in the wintertime. It's the great communal meeting place.
Actually, we're going to be showing the film on how...
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Coming up next, the Night of the Living Dead.